Okay, great. Let me make sure I don't need to admit anybody else. Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for joining. This is a session that I've been hoping for a while, and I'm so glad that we got Bianca here today. If you haven't met me, I'm Malika Began. I have a consulting company called Begin Development. We help executive teams, SVPs, individual contributors with individualized programs and team programs for organizations. We work in organization development through team development, manager development, coaching, all things team. And so this discussion is near and dear to my heart because I'm learning so much about DE&I, and then probably some more additions that Bianca's going to add to that today, I hope, that I'm learning about. If you want to find anything about these upcoming sessions, you can look at our begindevelopment.com. We've got a newsletter, so that's where we're kind of monthly sending out opportunities like bringing in Bianca. A thing that I found myself talking about a lot lately is how I want development to be available to anyone. And so I'm seeing that my clients are the people with the money who are able to bring us in and do these amazing development sessions. So how can we create more learning opportunities in our community and for each other that are free and available and open to everyone? So Bianca, thank you so much for being here today to share with us.
It's an honor. I'm excited to get in one of my favorite topics. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. I've had the pleasure of being a participant on Bianca's podcast, which was intimidating and exciting. And I think that dropped yesterday, correct, Bianca? So excited to have that out in the world because I think we had a fantastic conversation and she's just a great question and asker and also teacher from what I've experienced. So Bianca has her own consulting company. And I'm going to read one line that I saw in your bio that I just thought was so beautiful. And I don't want to paraphrase, but she put, "My superpower lies in finding the inflection point where multicultural marketing, social responsibility, and cultural fluency intersect." And so with that, I will hand it over to you, Bianca, because what more could I say and be excited about?
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to get started. I'm going to share my screen. I want to make sure every moment that we have, we can kind of dig into this topic. I will say I'm a fast talker just by nature. So if I go too fast, do a little pump your brakes sign and I can slow down. I love engagement. Feel free to go off mute, ask questions, push on things. That's why we're here. We're all here to learn and get a little bit better every day. So I want to make sure everyone has the space to do that. So let's jump into the topic. This topic is enabling belonging for engagement and connection. And I think a lot of times at DE&I, people think of diversity, equity, inclusion, but belonging becomes that silent element of it. But it really is the key of how you sustain a lot of the other principles in diversity, equity, inclusion. So it's really important for me that we always are aligned on the language we're using. So I'll talk about defining belonging, the role of allyship and intersectionality in belonging, the impact of belonging. I truly believe that in order for diversity, equity, inclusion principles to be successful, it does have to be tied to business impact and the impact you can have in a community. It can't be a nice to have. It's wonderful and we all need to do it, but it truly does drive business forward. And so I think that's so important to highlight. So we'll talk about the impact of belonging. And then also creating an environment of belonging for employees and clients or customers or whoever your outward facing kind of audience is to ensure you're creating a space of belonging for both. So belonging is one of humanity's most basic needs. If you think to your earliest moment of engaging with a group, you can kind of think about when you felt like you belonged, and you can probably clearly define a moment when you felt like you didn't belong. And you think about that from, I have moments that I can think about as early as like 5 or 6 where I felt like I belonged, or you felt like I'm look different from this person. I act different. I come from a different background. And as early as childhood, we start picking up on those things. Belonging is feeling happy or comfortable in a particular group. And it's a person in the workplace, it's a person's perception of acceptance. This can happen in work and school and life. It can even happen in families. We've done work where people say, I don't feel like I belong in my family. So there can be a lot of areas where a person's perception of being accepted is huge when it comes to belonging. There's a quote that I think aligns with this as well. When we choose to wonder about people we don't know, when we imagine their lives and listen for their stories, we begin to expand the circle of those we see as part of us. So part of the work in belonging is also to envision others belonging with you. Sometimes we can be very inward facing and slightly selfish about how we see belonging. And it really is something that everyone plays a role in making others feel like they belong. This isn't solely the responsibility of a workplace. And I'm going to play a quick video because I think that people a lot of times will get belonging. Let me stop sharing. We'll get belonging and fitting in a little bit swapped around. So I think Brene Brown, who I would argue is like the queen of belonging, will take us on that journey really quick.
I was so shocked to learn in the research that the opposite of belonging is fitting in. Because fitting in is assessing a group of people and thinking, who do I need to be? What do I need to say? What do I need to wear? How do I need to act? And changing who you are. And true belonging never asks us to change who we are. It demands that we be who we are. Because if we fit in because how we've changed ourselves, that's not belonging. That's not belonging, because you betrayed yourself for other people. And that's not sustainable.
And I always feel like she says it so well, because I think there is a misconception that belonging is adjusting yourself to fitting in. Now, I mentor a lot of people who are maybe a year out of college, and sometimes I have to tell them, yes, still coming into the workplace and belonging, it doesn't mean we're asking you to remove any of things that make you authentic or you, but there's elements of belonging. And I use the analogy, if you walked into someone's home and they said, hey, we're a shoes off home. We don't allow shoes in our home, but we have slippers. We have other options you can wear in your home. It's just our culture and our policy. And you walk in with your muddy boots and you stomp around and you're like, well, I feel better here. It makes me belong to have my shoes on. That isn't creating a sense of you have ownership in that belonging, right? So we talk a lot about that. Fitting in is asking you to become a different person to enter their home, not asking you to adjust to what is maybe the culture of that building that you're in or the workplace. So I do think there's a big difference between those two that sometimes I think generationally can get shifted on what belonging looks like. All right.
I was so shocked to learn in the research that the opposite.
You don't need to twice. We got it. We got it. And so why is belonging important? The need to belong theory means that essentially it is essential to humans. We as humans, race, creed, ethnicity, whoever you are, as a human, we have a sense of belong. Even those who feel like I'm an introvert, even introverts in a workplace expect to feel like they belong in that place, and their communication style may be different, but there's still that need to belong. It happens with little kids. It happens in your older age. It can be a range, but it's a human need. It's part of who we are. And so humans have a fundamental motivation to be accepted into relationships with others and be part of a social group. It's something we need for survival as humans. So when you think about how much time you put into the workplace, if you're 40 plus hours a week, feeling like you don't belong can be very draining emotionally, mentally, and all those pieces. I always think it's important that belonging, allyship, and intersectionality have a lot of overlap. But I think there's some misunderstandings around allyship, just like there is belonging. So allyship is using one's social privilege to stand up and support marginalized groups. And I think if we close our eyes and think of marginalized groups, there's certain groups that automatically pop into your mind. And you're like, oh, that's a marginalized group. But if you're in the workplace, a marginalized group can be someone who just has a different viewpoint. It could be someone with a different political background. They become a marginalized group in that workplace because they are the person, group, or concept treated as insignificant or other. So I definitely want to think, when we think about allyship and we talk about intersectionality, I want to kind of give a visual around that, the difference between what is allyship, but also what a marginalized group can mean in different workplaces, scenarios, things like that. And then touching on why allyship is important, allyship plays a key role in belonging. When we talk about everyone has a role in belonging, if you are working with someone and you notice that they're not engaged and they're not participating as a peer, as a coworker, you have ways that you can be an ally and help drive engagement. We'll talk about some of those ways. Or if you can speak up on ways that this person isn't being accommodated. So there's a lot that you can do with an allyship. There's individual, our actions to educate ourselves, understand how to communicate better. What you're doing in this very session is a form of allyship, because what you're doing is educating yourself on a topic that makes your workplace better or makes your social groups better. So already you're educating yourself in a form of allyship and being an ally. There's interpersonal, where you surface issues, and this is a lot more outside and vocal and loud, and so that one is a little more outside of yourself, or you're pulling someone to the side and saying, hey, I noticed this, how can I help? So there's different examples of allyship. And then there's structural, and we'll also talk about some of the way the structures can support belonging or kind of prevent belonging as well. And we'll talk intersectionality and belonging. This is so important. So intersectionality can be a really interesting thing when it comes to belonging. So a lot of times we focus on that inner blue circle. We focus on age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, race, gender, and physical abilities, qualities. So that's a lot of time the first thing we think about when we think about someone's identity or who they are. But really, there's so much that goes into who we are. And I'll tell a personal narrative. So you wouldn't know this by looking at me, and you wouldn't necessarily know it. But one of my first experiences that I felt where I didn't belong, or I was navigating a new space, I was homeschooled until 8th grade. So until 8th grade, my hippie Costa Rican mom had us gardening, doing homeschooling, living off the land. Like that was how I grew up for the first section of my life in 8th grade. And then 8th grade, 6 months into 8th grade, my parents decided we're going to put you in school. And so when I say an extreme cultural difference to go from homeschooling only around your siblings to suddenly being in 8th grade, and I don't think anyone, if you think about junior high, does anyone feel like they just ran into junior high and felt like they belonged and felt like they had a space? No, it's slightly terrifying for everyone, I feel like. But I remember thinking, like, not only do I not belong, but I don't understand the culture. I don't understand raising my hands. I don't understand why when a teacher says something and you know the answer, no one says anything because it's not cool to answer questions. Like, none of that was like upset. I didn't know what to wear. And so it took me a lot to figure out, what does it mean to belong? How do you find your people? How do you find your group? And part of intersectionality is we can't assume that everyone experiences and belonging find the same way. Because I'm thinking if people are walking like, how hard is school? Everyone's been at school. Figure out how to belong. You walk in, you find your group. But for someone entering into a new workplace, it can feel a lot like that. There's like the cool kids club and you don't know the language. I did a training session and the woman said, I don't feel like I belong at this company because it took me a month before someone told me where the restroom was on this floor. And I'm like, so you're thinking to yourself, a simple way to be an ally was like, hey, you're new. By the way, the floor on the downstairs bathroom will always be packed. You should go up to the 2nd or 3rd floor. That's a little thing that makes someone feel like they belong. Sorry, it looked like I froze for 1 second, but we're back. So I think with intersectionality, we always want to be mindful of the different ways in which people's identities intersect and shape their experiences. If you're in a workplace and you're only thinking about those things in kind of the intersection of belonging, it could be that someone has military experience that has them understanding the workplace differently. It could be that someone's appearance makes you think something about them in terms of the workplace that could be inaccurate. We're running back into political season, and I can't tell you how many different sessions I've done where one-on-one sessions where someone's like, well, I don't talk to that person because they don't share the same political beliefs as me. So they've now separated belonging in that workplace because they're kind of isolating each other. So just thinking about that outside window, that outside rung is so important. You don't know that in initially looking at someone. So part of understanding what they need to feel belonging may be in that outside circle. One other thing that's come up a lot in belonging is geographic location. You can feel really isolated at work if the whole team is West Coast and you're East Coast. And so you're always getting up early or you're missing evening meetings. There can be a lot in that space where you don't feel like there's a belonging. So understanding that everyone's experiences are different really help in establishing that. And I'll pause. We have time for a question. We exist through intersections, but our conversation about diversity regularly push us to pick one identity for ourselves at the expense of others. So I think we could all think, and you can even put it in the chat, like someone will ask you, who are you? And I actually find it's really interesting. In American culture, we lead with our careers. I find people say, I'm a this, and they want to put a label on who they are. But if someone really said, like, who are you? Is that the label, that first label you think about, right? Sometimes it's, I'm a mother, and we want to put those labels, but that's, in a lot of ways, we exist to push ourselves into categories, because that's how we find belonging with each other. We're like matching. You like sports, I like sports. You like this. So we do a lot of that when we're trying to figure out belonging. All right, we're going to talk about creating belonging in a workplace. But before we get into that, does anyone want to share like an early memory or the time they felt like they belonged, or a time when they were like, I didn't feel like they belong? Either one. It can be a school memory, work memory. Does anyone want to share one? If I can get one. I know it's a lot of pressure. I know. Think of one.
I'll volunteer.
Thank you.
I appreciate, I really felt for you, Bianca, listening to your experience transitioning to public school. That's so hard. For me, I think it reminded me, at least, of another school age experience of trying out for teams in high school. And growing up, I'm a first generation American. My parents are from Taiwan, so they moved here not speaking the language and not navigating the like American school system. And so I had no idea what I was supposed to do. Trying, I think it was like dance team or some kind of audition or tryout situation where I had never known anyone that had been on a sports team or an organized group. I didn't have a coach, or I wasn't in this as an extracurricular. And so really wanting to be involved in something I was interested in, but having no context. And then having, my peers, they had grown up going to these classes or gyms or, already in this world. And my first experience was just going to the clinic where you learn the routine you're supposed to try out with. And so it was definitely an eye-opening experience, like, oh, other people have been in this for like 12 years of their life already. And this is my
I'm
first
stepping
time.
in.
Like, yeah. So that was an interesting experience that I wouldn't know if I would associate with, being any of, it's a combination, like you said, of a lot of those different intersections. So yeah, really appreciate the quote and just what you've shared so far.
Oh, thank you. And it is in the workplace. It's the same way. You could be so good at your job and have been doing it 20 years, and you walk into a workplace and they're like, we don't do anything like that. And you're like, oh, what? And Katerina, am I saying that right? You told me. Go ahead.
I actually had to think hard, and I think one of the like really significant times when I actually felt like I belonged was when I found my group of people with like 18, 19 that had the same moral and political views and political activism. Everything else, like in school, in jobs and whatever, was not, even if I felt I was part of the team, it was not as significant as the feeling of belonging, of finding something you didn't know you actually needed so much.
Yeah, finding your people, finding your humans. And you want that to overlap in other places in a workplace. But also, if you find that outside of work, it can also impact who you are at work. It can make you a better colleague, a better coworker, because even that sense of belonging has you interacting with other humans that can give you a better perspective on people. Thank you for sharing. We'll have another chance to share. Let me get to this. So creating a sense of belonging in the workplace. There's 4 elements of belonging. Let me give it a minute so it pulls up. Being seen. People want to be seen at work. You want people to acknowledge that you're present. You want also this acknowledgement that the work you're doing matters. You're doing 8-9 hours of work a day. You want to feel like you're having an impact there. So being seen. There was times people reported that is more important to them than the financial reason they're at work, feeling like they're seen and they're part of it. Being connected. You don't want to be the last to find out information. You don't want to be the one sitting in the meeting not knowing. So that feeling of being connected, having that knowledge sharing was very important sense of belonging. The other one, being supported. This was one that it wasn't just, I want my direct manager to support me, but the feeling of belonging really comes from my colleagues support me. And I feel like I can support others, feeling like you add value from a support system. The other thing is everyone wants some cheat codes at work. Everyone wants to know some insider information. So feeling you're supported and you have that partnership. And I do think a lot of the work that Malika and the team does at Begin Development helps people feel supported. They understand that we're speaking, that we may have different communication styles, but I feel supported because you understand the perspective that I come from, or you understand the approach I'm taking. And the other thing that was really important of belonging is being proud of your work. And this was across all workplaces. It did not matter if you were in construction. It did not matter if you were a lawyer. You wanted to feel proud of the work you're doing and that you contribute to something and that your time is valuable and that you're seen. I feel like those are things we want everywhere in life. I'm going to share one more video. I think this is a good example of belonging, but I want to show kind of entering into new spaces. And so I'll show this really quick. And also I'll recommend the show. It's just so good. But 1 second. Let's get him going.
I'm supposed to climb this? Ooh, OMG. I know, Mama, you don't want me up here right now. Well, we up here. As a chubby black guy, I don't see a lot of folks who look like me exploring the world. Ooh. That was for you, Mom. I gotta show people that you can look like me and still live your best life. Ooh, this one got me. It's the power of just pushing past whatever that fear is right now.
That was amazing.
Oh, my God.
That was incredible.
We did that. The intensity, it is contagious. The emotion that came over me. OMG. Me stepping outside of my comfort zone, that's where life begins. I'm no Gordon Ramsay, I can tell you that. I want to show people that if I can do it, you can do it too. Yeah! Let's do it, baby!
Never Say Never with Jeff Jenkins. New series, Sunday, July 9th at 10 on National Geographic.
Okay. And I love this example of belonging, but before I jump in and talk about it, did anyone catch any themes about belonging that you saw in that clip or that video? And I'll give you some cheat codes, because like I said, everyone loves cheat codes. I think one of the examples that I love from that is he's in a space where this is not familiar. He's out of his element. And so he's trying to make sure that he feels like, I'm saying he, because that is how he identifies himself. And he wants to feel like he belongs in that space. And so to me, it's really fascinating to watch in this show. He goes to different countries and different places, but it's really intersectional belonging, because does my body belong here? Does my ethnicity belong here? Does my height, he's like 6'7" or something like that. Does my height belong here? Also, I grew up in Houston, Texas. Do I belong in nature? So there's all these elements of him overcoming. But I also really like this example because it shows you have to put work in to belong. You have to be able to, 1, enter the space. 2, there is things that you have to bring your authentic self. So in this format, he's going out of his comfort zone to try new things, but he's still bringing his authentic self to the table. And so I think in a lot of cases when people say, I want to feel belonging at work, but then they don't bring their authentic self, or they're not trying to at least get into the environment, get to know the environment and navigate. So it can't be a one-sided effort at work. But also his demonstration of belonging allows others to feel like they belong in the space. So once you establish belonging, it's contagious. It becomes this multifaceted kind of effort, because other people are like, oh, this person's navigating the space. I see some similarities in them, or I see some overlap. And so it starts kind of making that culture of belonging more contagious. And also it's a really good show, and it's kid friendly and all those things. So if you get a chance, I highly recommend. It gets so excited it wants to show it from twice. So creating belonging at work. 1, allies prevent exclusion. If you see someone who's not engaging, and I will note, this has gotten harder since we've moved into a remote environment. It's a lot harder to engage with someone when we're all on Zoom and you don't want to call out someone who looks like they're not engaged or they're not enjoying it. So I definitely think there's ways to drive engagement in the workplace. It can be a side message that said, hey, I noticed that you have been in this team and we haven't had a chance to connect. I'd love to get to know you. Here's some things that I found really helpful when I started. It can be just a gentle opening to kind of say, we've never engaged. Or if you know this person, hey, I noticed the shirt you have on and I love that. Is it from a band? Like, think of cues that you can use to engage with someone. Because sometimes it's just that you have to talk to someone and kind of get them warmed up to really be an ally. Or there may be times where you can amplify their voice as an ally and say, hey, I think that I've always seen you. I know you're really engaged. Do you have any perspectives that you'd like to share on this? I would love a different take than the one we usually take. So opening the kind of aperture of engaging them also helps as an ally. Involving employees in business decisions. This always scares HR professionals when I say this. They're like to a point. But I think it's not just involving, it's things that matter to their daily engagement. So I had a client where they removed Slack without telling anyone. They said, hey, they literally gave them 48 hours and they're like, hey, we're getting rid of Slack. We're moving into a different thing. We're moving into Microsoft Teams. And it was like this kind of cold email from IT that kind of laid out the steps, and it caused this emotional upheaval. And the CEO was like, why do they care so much? And it was their connection to each other. It made them feel like they belonged. They had special groups in which they had conversations. They had history. They had memes. This one person got really emotional and went to the CEO and was like, I have memes that like demonstrated what kind of day I was having. And the CEO was like, I just don't get it. And it was a big business decision. It was the way they communicated with certain clients. So involving in that decision and making them feel empowered, or at least giving this timeline of reasoning and transition, can really help with belonging. Embrace the whole human being. And this doesn't mean you get to act any way that you want in the workplace, but there is a moment of, can you wear the hair that you were born with to work? Can you show up in a way that aligns with workplace guidelines, but also allows you to bring your authentic self and feel like you belong? Can you enter in a space where you can acknowledge you're in a space of learning? So you can say as a whole human, hey, I'm still learning in this role. Am I able to ask you some questions? So really embracing the whole human. And recognizing employees for their hard work. And this was interesting, and I'll go through some stats as well. But when we recognize employees, people want to recognize above a lot of times. They want to be like, oh, that was great. And they give kudos above. But it's so important for belonging that you're giving it below and parallel to you in kind of your roles. And not always things that drastically impacted revenue. You could finish a client meeting and say, hey, I just want to give a big thank you to the admin team who scheduled all of this, made sure the room was ready on time, got us lunch, did all the things that really meant to the client, that were the soft skills that made a big difference to us closing this business. So like having those pieces of acknowledgement across the board. I'd like to thank our team who does schedule Jenga every day with everyone across 4 different continents to ensure that we get in this meeting in time. Those kind of compliments make someone feel like they belong and their role matters in the organization. And it especially matters peer to peer. Like they said, that it matters if your peers see the work you're doing as well. Fair promotion practices was a big thing that you saw in the workplace of keep people. And fair promotion practices means clarity on what it takes to be promoted. Was the biggest thing that people said, I don't feel like I belong because I have no idea how to be successful in this organization. So clarity on how to be successful was an important piece of belonging. That ranked higher than receiving increases in salary. It was more important that I understand what my long tail growth and success looks like. Equal and transparent access to information. There are times that a lot of people felt like one special group gets access to information and they're left on the outside, which impacts what they're able to do at work, doesn't make them feel like they belong. Make employees feel welcome. Sometimes people are really good about the first 1 week that someone's new employee, they make them feel really welcome. And then they expect that after a week, you're going to get it together. It takes a long time. And more senior you are, they said it can take up to 6 months to even get your head around what's happening, especially depending on who your role. So just ensuring that employees feel welcome, that they're having check-ins. And the other piece was ensure leaders avoid favoritism. This was a big factor that says only people who appear this certain way are successful in the organization. And that wasn't just leaders of a senior level, that was their junior managers, that was even peer-to-peer. It felt like I only get invited to lunch if I'm in this specific group. So how do you expand and ensure that there's belonging? We talked about a time in a group where what that made you feel like you belong, but does anyone else want to have an example of a workplace belonging they want to share?
I'll share one. I was thinking about how when I was in an organization that had such a strong culture and then we got bought, how difficult it was even though they were welcoming and like did all the things and did make information accessible, we had a lot of feelings around like, yay, you bought us more opportunities, growth, and also what does this mean for what we built and how do we, like, we definitely wanted to keep what we had, but meet all these new people and be part of a unit. And it was just really hard. And it was like 5 or 6 years ago, and we still talk about it. When I see people that were a part of that transition, it like comes up and we talk about like, oh, wasn't that so hard? We had this thing that was so special and it didn't get to stay untouched. It had to change. And that was just really hard for all of us.
I love that you bring that up, because even when they analyze when companies acquire companies and the profitability shifts, part of it is that like you had a well-oiled machine, you knew each other, you had a cultural kind of connection as well. And then you get acquired and some of that culture shift is disregarded, even if they make you feel maybe welcome initially. And that has an impact on productivity and how you do work and how you feel about that. And it changes, would you recommend someone to work in that environment too? And some things are unavoidable, right? Acquisitions are going to happen, but how do you make that transition and also acknowledge kind of that you're merging two very different cultures? And it usually is the acquiring culture gets to maintain their dominance. And so that's another hard thing about it too. Perfect example. All right. Oh, Stacy, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Bianca. I'll try and be quick with this one. Just in terms of a time, just feeling like belonging in the workplace. There was an organization that I worked with as like in a nonprofit agency, and there was a group of individuals, all from different walks of life, various intersectionalities. And at lunchtime, we all were very intentional on not booking any client appointments and just like scheduling this hour where we would sit down, watch Family Feud or The Social or whatever was on TV at a certain time. And it would always bring up just very authentic, very organic conversation, political discussions, and, you know, being able to agree to disagree and all that good stuff would come up, being able to have, you know, different cultural foods. And one thing that stood out to me in this particular place of work that I think really enhanced people's sense of belonging around the holiday period. I know, you know, oftentimes people would kind of default to Christmas and things like that during the holiday, but we had organized something where each individual was able to highlight all of the different holidays that were happening kind of close to the end of the year, at the beginning of the year. So we had everything from Lunar New Year, Kwanzaa, Orthodox Christmas. Like, it was absolutely amazing. And I think it's something that was really helpful for the clientele as well, to say that we're not just practicing Euro-Christian customs, but that they could see a sense of themselves reflected in the workplace as well. So those are just two quick examples that I can think of.
That's a beautiful example. It made me feel like I want to sit and watch Family Feud. Like, even you're explaining it, I found 4 areas where I'm like, oh, I felt like I would have belonged there. And so that's a sweet experience too. And imagine, it makes work completely different. You want to show up to work because you're like, oh, I cannot wait to catch up on Family Food, to try new foods, to experience new cultures. And also it allows the employees to bring their full selves to work, which makes belonging that much sweeter. So thank you. That's such a good example. All right, here's the fun kind of quiz thing, because I think this shocks everyone. So we'll do 1 for A, 2 for B, 3 for C, 4 for D. You get where we're going with this. So a study by Better found that employees who feel a sense of belonging at work are X more likely to perform their jobs at a high level. Do we think it's A, B, C, or D? What do we think? Okay, we have B. We have B for the win. Let's see. B. 50 already you're good at this. 56% of employees found, a study by Better found that employees who feel a sense of belonging at work are 56 more likely to perform their jobs at a high level. So imagine the impact to the overall organization when you feel a better sense of belonging at work. 56% more likely. Now, all the efforts we put into optimizing work and doing technology, and really you could increase sense of belonging and see that increase in productivity as well. All right. In a study by Great Place to Work, companies with a strong sense of belonging are what times more likely to be profitable? 2 or 3? What do we think? All right, I'm gonna go for it. B, 3x times more. I feel like people are on a roll. Like everyone already knew these answers. You're all on a roll, but 3 times more likely to be profitable. Like when you think about when people say, "Oh, DE&I," and then it's kind of an afterthought. Imagine that 3x times likely to be profitable. So when we're searching for ways to kind of drive company growth, a lot of times we'll say, "What's your sense of belonging for your employees? How do they feel?" And that same thing is echoed in clients who feel like they belong and customers that feel like they belong when they enter into your workplace, that impact. All right. In a study by Qualtrics, found that employees who feel a sense of belonging take how many fewer sick days? I think 1, 2, or 3. Going with 1, let's see. See, 75% fewer sick days. So basically, you're just sick of being at work with people you don't like, is apparently what happens, because 75 fewer work days, fewer sick days. But the example that Stacy just gave, why would you call in sick? Like, let's say, some days you just get up and you're like, I can't deal with those people, so I'm not going to come into work. But imagine if you're in that environment that Stacy described. You're like, I'm not missing family food. I'm coming in. I'm not missing this holiday experience. It changes the workplace. So 75% fewer sick days. And this wasn't that these people aren't getting sick. It was just they didn't feel the need to leverage that because they were engaged and happy and they felt like they belonged there. And a lot of these were around mental health days too. They were taking less, honestly, mental health, not because, and we don't want to discourage people taking their time, but if you don't need it because you're happy to be somewhere, how much does that change your environment? All right. So quickly, just to close that out, the benefits of belonging. So the employee benefits. Employees who feel like they belong at work are more likely to be satisfied with and engaged in their jobs. This leads to improved performance and productivity, reduce stress and burnout. As we get into Q4 and there's so much stress and burnout, a lot of that is because you don't feel like you belong, or we're in holiday season and you feel very isolated because of how holidays are being communicated, or you're juggling a lot of things that we talk about, that outside intersectional kind of wheel that people aren't aware of, so they aren't maybe creating a space of belonging. Increase creativity and innovation. When people feel like they belong, they chime in more, they call out ideas, they look at ways to be more innovative, they come up with solutions because they're cross-sharing and communicating with one another, and they're able to see the other person's perspective. So they're like, oh, I see what that department does. Same thing a lot when we talk about the work that Begin Development does. It's same. It's like, how does understanding someone and how to communicate with them and feeling like you belong increase creativity and innovation in an organization? And then we talked about fewer sick days, but better mental health and physical health. You feel better, so you want to be there. And the employee benefits. Employers who create a sense of belonging among their employees are more likely to see several benefits. So one, reduced turnover. You don't quit if you love where you work. And it's fascinating when they do a lot of studies and you look at people who've stayed somewhere a long time and then they retire. It's a shock to their system because they loved those people they worked with. They felt like they belonged. They don't want to retire. You'll see a lot of people who've worked long times in like union jobs. Like, I don't want to retire. And they're like, is it the money? They're like, no, I want to see these people every day. And yes, retire, go live your life, but also to see that reduced turnover. Increased employee retention, which is different from turnover, meaning they're retained and they're promoting within the organization. They're contributing. The cost of onboarding an employee is insane. Every time I see those numbers, I'm like, it's insane. So when you think about, one, you keep that person happy, but also you're kind of reducing those costs. Improved customer service and experience. How often have you walked up to a counter and you can tell someone hates their job? Like, you can feel it coming off them and you're like, oh, not you. Like, not you, please don't do this, because it changes your engagement with that person. So it really does have an impact on customer service and experience. And increased profitability. I think this is worth kind of double tapping is companies with a strong sense of belonging among employees are more likely to be profitable. So you're not taking any L's. There's no losses in kind of creating a sense of belonging in your work environment. And notice I wasn't like, oh, you need to create slides and all kind of those insane things that you see these tech companies create to create belonging. No, it's about acknowledging some of those key human necessities like engagement, acknowledgement, some of those pieces. But if you're at a tech company that has a slide and kombucha on tap, more power to you, because I would feel like I belong there because I do love those things. And then I can touch on really quick, where are we at in time? Where we have a little bit more time. Creating an environment for clients. I don't know how many people have client facing or engaging with customer roles. We're nodding. We have a couple of people, so that helps. I love Mark Cuban's quote, and interesting. He's got a whole lot going on, but I really do love some of the work he does, and he does focus on inclusivity in a lot of work he does. And if you don't know, Mark Cuban is a businessman and owns several sports teams, and I don't know, that man owns a lot of things, but it is so much easier to be nice, to be respectful, to put yourself in a customer's shoes and try to understand how you might help them before they ask for help than to try to mend a broken relationship. And so this talks a lot about creating, it's expensive to make a customer feel like they don't belong in your space. Sephora spent a lot of money recouping some of the things they did when they made certain underrepresented groups feel like they didn't belong in their space. That was a costly mistake. And the owner of Sundial Brands, who owns several hair care products, he'll also say the market will punish you. And that's what you want. If your customers don't feel like they belong, it isn't this uproar that happens. The market will punish you, and you will feel that from a revenue perspective. So just quick tips on creating an environment of belonging for clients. One, grasp clients' aspirations and values. So even from a customer, and I worked at Nordstrom, a customer would walk in, and it's a commission-based environment. And as soon as they walk in, it's like, how do I make you feel good in this space? How do I understand? I'm like, what event are you planning for? The more you made them feel valued and embrace the whole human, and you listen to their stories about their kids and their dog and all this, but making them feel heard really changes that environment that you have with your clients. Use inclusive language. I can't tell you how many times I've seen client relationships damaged by someone making an immediate assumption and not using inclusive language. And so it's okay to ask, like, how do you like to be addressed? What are things I should know about you as we kind of start this engagement? Asking some of those questions, I think, are always helpful, but listening, hearing context clues, hearing, we once had a client issue where a client had expressed they recently got married, and the person automatically assumed, instead of saying partner or your person, they automatically went to a certain gender, and it caused this tension, and the client didn't want to correct them. And I was like, so use inclusive language, ask questions. And if you mess up, apologize, be like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have made an assumption. And a sorry is such a powerful tool. An apology is an incredibly powerful tool. And build trust. Be transparent, consistent, and offer solutions that address the client's challenges, makes them feel heard, and that increases the sense of belonging. And then really just 3 key steps: engage, share valuable content. Clients are humans. They want to see great articles. Malik and I were just talking about that. Sharing podcasts, sharing different things with the client, make them feel seen and heard and not transactional. And so those little engagements can go really far in terms of building a relationship. Recognize their loyalty, just like your colleagues. Clients want to hear they did a good job. I've been in this pitch situation, and the client turned to me and goes, how'd I do? And I'm like, you did so awesome. And they're still humans who need like a little bit of reassurance, especially when you see like a junior person in the room, or even a senior person. Just going to say, if you see a senior person in the room, a great way to build rapport with your client is to go up to the senior person that, I just want to say how amazing your team is, how great they are to work with. Some compliment, because it, one, helps that leader, but also it helps that team feel acknowledged and seen. So there's little things you can do in recognizing. And then collaborate. Foster strong client connections. If you can foster that connection and collaborate, make the relationship feel collaborative and not transactional, it really does make a big difference. Malika, this is like also in your world, anything you think that really helps in this space?
Yeah, I mean, how can I chime in when I'm taking notes?
Oh, and I got her to see it. Look at this.
I know. No, this is This is great. I'm just thinking about setting the stage so that these things can happen. Like, what are the things that you can put in the environment so that engaging, recognizing, and collaboration can happen? Because there are some things in a culture that if that trust isn't there, or if that belonging isn't there, if there's not a welcome, just the little things that I think, especially when I'm working with companies that are moving so fast right now, people aren't like, we're not going to do that. They just aren't doing it because they're forgetting. They're like putting out fires and getting so many emails. I think my clients are so overwhelmed right now that one thing that I am able to do for them is hold some space for these things to happen, at least in our sessions, and then they refocus back on them. So anyway, all that to say, anything we can do to help people remember to engage, recognize, collaborate, and find ways to bring this into the space, it's probably not out of ill will. More often than not, what I'm seeing is that it's out of the fast pace or the burnout or just the tiredness.
Agreed. One way to your point is introductions. I find the warmer your introduction, the more you get a little bit of authenticity in your introduction, it opens up the space. So sometimes I'm like, I'm Bianca Reed. I'm a mom of 4. I'm a military spouse. Like, I'll start saying things that have nothing to do with the moment when I'm in, because someone will be like, oh, my uncle was in the Air Force. Where are you stationed? And then suddenly you get like this, you start pulling and you just listen. Don't even say anything, just listen to how they answer, because now you find out they also have a kid, or they just adopted 3 kids. I just found out, she's like, I just adopted 3 kids. How is having a bunch of kids? I'm like, insane, but wonderful. So you like have these moments where you can kind of find that commonality. But I do find, give a little authenticity in your introductions when you first work with clients. It changes the tone. They're like, oh, I want to work with this person.
Yeah, we're talking so much about clients, but a lot of people, and I know in my mind, I'm replacing the word client with team a lot.
Team,
like
yep.
The internal team is the client, right? Like the people that I work with every day are my client. And so I think this is really great to think about, like traditional clients and then your internal, your team, your clients.
Yes, and it applies even, I even find this, and I know this sounds crazy, when you're using it outside of work, where you're in environments where you're volunteering or you're at a doctor's office, like those same practices can change. They say your healthcare experience is very different if the doctor feels comfortable with you. So sometimes it's so interesting. It's like, how do I create a sense of belonging for you so you pay attention to all the things I want to share about me? And then I leave you with some key takeaways. Why is belonging important? It's a human need. Like, just at base level, you at that horrible feeling when you walk into a party and someone told you, oh, the dress code is this, and you walk in jeans and a t-shirt because that's what they told you. And then you're looking around like, who did this to me? Who did this to me? So it's that feeling of like being an outsider feels so uncomfortable. That could just be my own vanity, but I'm like, don't tell me it's casual. And then I show up and then improve performance at work, retain talent, and drives profitability. Creating a sense of belonging. Consider an intersectionality. We aren't just those 5 things you see about an initial human visually. There can be so many other commonalities or other layers of things about that person. Be an ally. Being seen creates it. Being connected, being supported, and being proud. So in those same things in reverse, creating those spaces for someone also can have a big impact. And then I say clients, but like very much to your point, it can be teams, it can be your own family. And it's like, know and engage your clients and your audience. So engage, remember to listen as much as you say, which is different for today. I know I've been going on, but use inclusive language. I think that's so key. Think of a couple ways that you can remove some of the gender from your language, some of the things from your language that may set someone off right in the beginning. Build trust. Recognize and collaborate. And of course, we talked about engagement. Any other takeaways that you got from today's session?
I can share. Bianca had a lot of takeaways, but two top of mind insights, refreshers, and just even reinforcements of what you've said. One, it takes work, and it takes work on our behalf as well. And I've learned that in my journey, that it is not everyone else's solely responsibility to create an experience of belonging for myself, but it also takes a little bit of courage and some leaps and discomfort for me. That's been my experience and continuous learning journey. And the other, just the power of connection and relationships. And at work, we recently shifted our sales we used to call it like sales training or proposal delivery training, to relationship building with clients training. And it's all about connection, to your point, using your talents, your gifts, your uniqueness to find a connection. And if by the time you go to that proposal meeting that to get the sale, if you haven't connected with the owner and try to understand their vision and who they are and their culture, you're starting way behind. And so the work starts from the relationship. And so in this our operationals VP that leads this training has been able to take a very small region to a very profitable region based on relationships and the long-term investment. So anyway, it was really just reinforcing to hear you talk about that.
Good. I know I'd love that you gave that example, because I do feel like there's so many real world case studies of you create this sense of belonging internally, and even building relationships help with internal skills with people. So it really does make a difference.
Bianca, thank you so much. Before we run out of time, I want to make sure, where can we find you? Where can we be? Oh, yeah, you're
We go.
Thank you. Okay, great.
You can find me at conveyculture.com. I also have a podcast which has different examples of talking about this, but also interviewing incredible people like Malika as well. And then if you ever want to reach out and send me an email, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to kind of engage. The other thing I will send for every workshop I do, I always include a read, watch, and listen list. So that'll be coming from Begin Development, but it's just resources. I feel like everyone learns differently, so you got to do read, watch, and listen, so everyone has an environment which they feel like they can be successful.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bianca. I've heard this a few times, like from you, following your stuff, and I just pick something new up every time. So I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your engagement, everyone. It helps when everyone's just not sitting there like, so thank you so much for your engagement. I appreciate you.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to stop our recording. I think. There we go.